Welcome to the Sensible Center podcast, where two middle-aged guys drunkenly talk politics and political reform. Grab an adult beverage and enjoy the show. Further information can be found at sensiblecenterpack.com. You can reach us at sensiblecenterpack@gmail.com or follow us on X at USASCPack. Hey, Bob.
Happy May, Kevin.
That's right, it's May Day.
It is.
I didn't participate in any military parades or anything today. Isn't that
I
what
did
the
not either.
Russians typically do? They roll out the nukes or something on May Day.
I did get in a few arguments on Twitter, if that counts.
It's a labor thing, isn't it? May Day. It's a
Yeah, I think
communist.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, considering I'm not working, I guess I didn't
Come,
celebrate it.
come to think of it, there was no mention of May Day in the news at all today.
No. Well, you had the Fed and you had that press conference, and I think everyone was happy that they didn't plan to raise rates.
Right.
if I
Well,
read
yeah,
it correctly.
the market at first adjusted, went from down to up pretty high, and then it kind of
Yeah,
fell back.
then it fell back. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're like, wait a second, we were counting on a couple cuts, and now we're celebrating
Yeah.
when they say, well, we might not have to raise them.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, that I think they're going to start buying back some treasuries,
Oh, great.
which tells me that that was announced today, which obviously they want to lower the rates that way instead of lowering the rates.
Yep, that's what I was explaining to Deb. I'm like, the only way they could really influence those treasury rates, because they auction them off, is to start expanding their balance sheet again, right?
Yep. Yep.
You start buying them up, and you're going to drive those rates down. Otherwise, the Fed's fund rate doesn't necessarily tie to the auction, and I think they've got clearly, as you stated before, they're going to have to auction off more and more treasuries as we go, because it's just going to be paying the interest at this point.
Yeah.
So
It's pretty interesting, and I think they're walking a pretty fine line here. And I know you and I've been talking about it for years, back since the Great Recession.
yep,
And I had some major problems with quantitative easing because I really thought we were backing ourselves into a corner, and now I think we're starting to see some of the results of that, some symptoms of that. I mean, I think potentially we're walking pretty closely to stagflation.
yeah.
Um,
I'm not there yet on that, but simply because we the labor market is still strong. GDP was less, but it's still growing. We haven't. Powell said, we haven't had that recession that everyone thought was going to be needed to drive down inflation, right? So we still have a recession in our back pocket, right?
yeah, that's true. We do. I
Uh,
really don't think they want it, especially this
no,
year going into an election.
I don't think anyone
Um,
wants it, but
no.
yeah, I mean that's always been what leads into it. So we've managed not to do that at this point, and maybe that's why inflation's a little stickier. But it could also be stickier because there's still a lot of money sloshing around the system, right?
Yeah, I think that's the case too. Wages continue to rise.
Yep,
Um,
yep,
house house values continue to rise.
yeah.
So
So we'll see. Time will tell. Well, anyways,
another
Bob.
quick
Oh,
another
go
quick
ahead.
bit of news today. I thought I'd just drop on you real quick.
Uh-oh.
Tesla laid off pretty much all staff related to their efforts of expanding charging stations or fast charging stations across the country. And there's a lot of states that were working with them that are suddenly confused as to what's going to happen. Other electric vehicle makers like Ford had deals with them to start allowing Fords to be charged at those and things. The old ones through an adapter, and the new ones through other methods. It's pretty interesting as to why that happened and why the decision was made. And I don't know quite what that is yet. These are headlines that really just came out a few hours ago.
Oh, really?
I think that's pretty interesting. Yeah.
I haven't seen that. I do find the kind of EV backlash, or what they call what it is, EV winter, kind of interesting, right? Because it seemed like we're heading in the direction and traveling around the world. I would say that other countries are even ahead of us in regards to the transition. And now we're getting to that point where there's stories like this. There's stories about issues with range and range anxiety, and having owned two different electronic vehicles, um, I really enjoyed them. I was a big proponent of it, and I think as the market's expanded and you get past kind of the early adopters, and get more mass market, I think that's kind of driving this. I don't think people have been educated enough about some of the limitations, and now charging stations are clearly part of that, and ever quicker charging stations. Right? I think the American public doesn't expect to sit around and charge for 30 minutes their car when they're on a road trip or something like that. So
And have to wait in line for the pleasure of waiting 30 minutes for your car to charge. Yeah, it's a
yeah,
problem.
I mean when I had my cars, I would probably, I think there's only once or twice where I actually had to wait for a charging station, but clearly they you had to plan your trip around where those were, right?
Yeah,
And
I think
usually it's something where you'd go out to lunch or whatever and charge your car in 20 or 30 minutes and then continue on. It's or with the Tesla they had you could stream Netflix and whatever, and I usually just watched the show and sat in the car and maybe ate lunch or whatever. So I
I had
never
an
had an issue with it.
interesting conversation with somebody recently who actually came into Nashville and the rental car company said, "Hey, we're going to upgrade you. We're going to give you a rental or an electric car." They said, "No, I don't want one." Well, he said, "Why not?" He's like, "I don't want to deal with figuring out where chargers are and having to charge it and having to wait and all that stuff. I don't want to show up at someone's house and have to try to figure out how to plug the thing in and all that." And the company said, "Well, all we have is this other car for you." And then the person's like, "I'll take that one. I don't want the rental car." And I think part of what the electric car manufacturers were thinking is we're going to give a bunch of these things to these rental car agencies, and they're finding the rental car agencies can't sell them
Yeah,
or
I mean
can't rent them,
that
right?
actually happened when I went to Arizona a couple months ago. I signed up for the manager's special because that was the lowest rate, and when I
Yep.
showed up late at night, they're like, "It's an electronic vehicle." I said, "That would have been nice to know." It didn't mention in the manager special, but they're like, "Yeah, we could give you whatever we want then." And I said, "Yeah, I didn't want one simply because I didn't know
Where to
Arizona,
charge it?
right in
Yep.
Arizona." So I ended up paying higher. They're like, "We could give you a different one for this price," and I'm like, "Yeah, just give me that." But yeah, I clearly when you look at rental, if you're renting a car, the EVs are the cheapest, which is interesting because given gas prices, you'd think that people would kind of want an EV, but I think it's just the not knowing and the inconvenience factor that I think a lot
And
of
I
them are
think
probably sitting
I,
on the lots.
I think they drive a little differently than other cars as well. So you get in one in a rental and you've never driven one before, and there's a learning curve and
Yep,
all that
absolutely.
too.
Absolutely. What are you drinking tonight? Oh, by the way, uh, we Bob and I were together last week. We were planning on doing a podcast, but we ended up day drinking too much that it wasn't really in the cards at night, right, Bob?
Yeah,
We
it
were kind
wasn't going
of
to be very good.
it was we care about our listeners, so we decided best to kind of
Not
put it off to this week.
not that the podcast is ever very good, but that would have set a new low. Yeah.
Yeah, we hit Nashville and the Bourbon Trail, and I think Deb converted to MAGA when she went to Chris Rock's Honky Tonk, right?
Kid Rocks. Yep. Yeah, she was having a
Did
good
I say
time.
Kid Rock? What did I say?
Yeah, you said Chris Rock. When Chris Rock gets a honky tonk, we'll go hit that one too, though.
I haven't even been drinking that much.
Yeah. Hey, that
That
sounds like
that
a
would be
good comedy
interesting.
skit. We should pitch that to
Chris
somebody.
Rock's Honky Tonk.
Yeah,
But they almost had her, didn't they, Bob? I think
they
she
did.
was. I think she was feeling the sniffing the taste or tasting the sniff of freedom or something like that.
She was feeling it.
She was feeling it, to say the least. And then we went to the Bourbon Trail and spent too much money on bourbon. Good news is for everyone: the bourbon bubble is still inflating. I think it's
It's still
crazy, isn't
still
it?
there. Yeah, yeah. It's a big business.
As I was explaining to Bob, we went to Buffalo Trace to visit there on Monday morning, and at 9 o'clock there were probably 150 people in line waiting to register for their one allocated bottle
Of Eagle Rare.
of Eagle Rare, which is I don't think is that rare, right?
It's not.
But
It's good.
everyone
Don't get me wrong. It's good, but it's not that rare.
everyone was
Yeah.
happy to buy it. So I'm drinking a bottle that we almost finished in an hour or two on the lovely patio of our True Hotel in Shepherdsville, Kentucky. It's
With our good friend. It wasn't just us two, but yeah.
yeah, sure.
Yep.
There were three of us, so that's not as
Hidden
bad.
Barn, right?
Hidden Barn, which you explained to me the interesting story was, and it's on the
Yeah.
back of
So
their label. Go
the
ahead.
um the previous master distiller from Old Forester, her name was Jackie. I'll call her Jackie Z because I'll destroy her last name right now. So I apologize for that. But she left and she became the master distiller for this new startup company. And if anybody knows Old Forester and what they produce, you know they produce some really excellent whiskeys. Really from their cheapest whiskey all the way up through their birthday bourbon, which is fantastic, and then everything in between. So I was really excited to try that whiskey when I saw it down there because I haven't seen it anywhere in here or where I used to live. And the fact that we got through it so fast probably says that it's good. But at that point, my taste buds were pretty fried, so I can't give a fair review on it.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely an easy drinker. It's I would say tasting it now after not having any bourbon for a couple of days. I do like it. I don't know if it's a $80 bottle, which I think is roughly the retail on it. But the interesting story is, and I don't know if you or Tom explained it to me, was that the Hidden Barns is during Prohibition, that all the people in Kentucky painted their barns black, so you
Oh,
couldn't
I did
tell who was.
explain that to
You
you.
did,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
I did. Yeah.
You couldn't tell who was distilling liquor because when you distill liquor, there's what is it, black, some type of black mold that develops,
Nope. You
which you
can see
see
it
on
down
the.
there growing on trees,
Yep.
as well as the side of the brick houses. Yeah.
That's why all the fences and the barns are black.
Yep. So back in Prohibition, everybody painted their barns black so the people who were actually distilling wouldn't get caught.
God bless them. That's that independent, free spirit of the South.
If it wasn't for those people, it's very probable that our bourbon wouldn't be as good today.
That's right. Let's pay our respects.
To lawbreakers.
So what are you drinking? I hear it
I'm
sloshing.
I am actually drinking a Penelope straight rye whiskey that was aged in a toasted barrel. So a toasted barrel is toasted rather than charred. So uh, you get stronger flavors, at least theoretically. I find the toasted bourbons are a little bit sweeter. Usually have a little bit more of a marshmallow flavor profile to them. And this one's aged 6 years, and it is 55% alcohol by volume.
That's up there. 110 proof.
You got it.
Too hot. So there's been a lot going on since we last spoke. Um, so we're gonna try to narrow down the topics here. One I found the Supreme Court continues to hear arguments on. It's going to be a very interesting June once they start giving some of these decisions because I think they all have to be issued by June something.
Yeah, before
Um,
they shut down for the break. Yeah.
so they did one on homelessness. I don't know if people read about that or looked into it, but it's a very interesting case. It was a city of about 40,000, Grants Pass in Oregon, and evidently the lower courts have ruled that eradicating the homeless, either through all these tented encampments that you now see in cities, and clearly there's been a problem developing or over the years that has even grown recently as far as the homelessness crisis. Um, and we're sort of at record numbers now, and you could see them in the major cities, Los Angeles, Chicago. But this Grants Pass, they brought the case up because they wanted to be able to eradicate, but they didn't they don't have a shelter in the city. They have nowhere. They haven't provided any housing for the homeless in their city. So the lower courts ruled that this is against the Eighth Amendment of the Constitution, which is basically the cruel and unusual punishment or excess fines by eradicating them from, not eradicating, but removing them from public land and property and not providing a place to sleep, or fining them or jailing them. You are violating the Eighth Amendment, which is kind of a unique kind of way to look at it, right?
Isn't
Um,
jailing them providing a place to sleep?
yeah, but it's also limiting their freedom at the same time. Um, so the arguments, and so there was arguments in front of the court with questions by the justices. So it really gets into the issue of, is there a right to be housed in this country, sort of, right? Um, because they're saying, well, you're not providing them a means to not sleep on the streets. So
Well, and that's
is
pretty subjective, right? I mean, who's not providing them with that? Is there not a homeless shelter in California where they can go
well, they're saying in
or
that
elsewhere?
particular city, there's not. You're right. There's probably places around the country, but they would have to move, right? And maybe
And
they
I
don't
think
have
that's
the
what it kind of
ability to
gets
do
down
that.
to, right? Is these places are saying, you know what, we don't want it here. So we're just gonna, we're gonna do this in hopes that you're gonna move on.
Yeah, I mean, the question
Is it cruel and unusual punishment?
is this something that happens to people, or is it part of a choice that they're making, right? So, do we have an inherent right to have a place to lay our head within this country? Which is an important issue, right? And if the court decides the city needs to provide for this, otherwise they have to let people live where they want to live in the streets, that's a kind of a major thing for this country. And I don't think we've ever kind of crossed that bridge before. Unfortunately, we haven't had to, but now we do. So, um,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, here's the thing, right? If they're outside of my front door and making my family feel safe, and I can't, walk, if I get to the bus stop 2 minutes late and my daughter has to walk through the homeless encampment to get home in my
right?
absence,
Yeah.
that's a real problem. And I think it's a real concern for people who just are trying to live their lives. Um,
But then,
and
should you support taxes to and policies that provide those people either affordable housing or free shelter? I understand your issue, but it's
I
sort of
think you should
what is the
support programs to provide opportunities for these people.
it's sort
I
of
mean,
what
why wasn't this a problem in the 50s or 60s?
I I mean, I think there's various reasons. I think we used to institution. I do believe a good number of the people on the streets are are mentally
Mentally ill.
ill, and I think we used to institutionalize those people more. So we did have a
There weren't
place where
that
they ended
there
up.
weren't this many of them though. Of course, a lot of them now are addicted to drugs that didn't
Right.
exist back then.
There's more of a drug issue now. I think there is an economic issue in regards to affordable housing, especially in the cities
Yeah.
like San Francisco, where you're gentrifying certain areas, and there's really not. These people are getting priced out of where they normally live. So I mean, it's a very
Why not?
complex issue.
There's a lot of green area in this country. I mean, why not pick a spot that is 20 miles in either direction from the nearest neighborhood and build something there? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
You
mean,
don't
I
have
think
to have
some
it in the
cities have
city.
experimented with stuff like that. Like here's where we're going to allow it, and here are either temporary shelters or whatever where you can have a place. I mean, that's a possibility, but
Yeah, but
I think
again, in the
I think
city, you're going to come across kids. You're going to come across businesses and storefronts. You're trying to have a business, and people don't want to come in because they don't want to. walk over the turd in the sidewalk and the person that's sleeping behind the turd on the sidewalk and the other guy that's standing there drugged out of his mind unconscious, right? So you're hurting businesses. If you're somewhere in a green space where there's nobody else around, give them the choice. You can go here or you can go to jail, right? Or you can go here, you can be fined. Right? We'll even take you there. I get that. I understand that. Maybe it should be dealt with at the state level,
So it sounds like
but
you're on the side that the state has a role to play in solving this,
the state, not the feds. Yes.
the state or local, which
Yes.
I think is
But
the appropriate place that it should be dealt with. But
I think if
I guess the Supreme Court, I guess this case says, is the state responsible? So I was reading this article and it says the conservative judges, it's they believe it's can be hard to draw the line between somebody's conduct, which can be legally punished either through a fine or through jailing, and a status that they are unable to change, which cannot be punished. So, is homelessness due to somebody's conduct, or is it because it's just a status that is very difficult to change? I mean,
uh,
that's hard
dropping
to
a deuce on
determine.
a sidewalk in front of a business is conduct.
Well, this is what Gorsuch said. This is actually you're talking about. Um, he had actually asked the question: how about if there are no public bathroom facilities? Do people have an Eighth Amendment right to defecate and urinate? Is that conduct or is that status? So that you could serve on the Supreme Court now, Bob. You're thinking like Gorsuch. That's
I
exactly
do
what he
like
said.
Gorsuch.
Is that conduct or is that status? You're
He's
saying that sounds
probably
like conduct.
a close second and my favorite on the court. Yeah, might even be a first. But yeah, I think
We're gonna have to buy you a
yes, it sounds
Gorsuch
like
T-shirt or
conduct.
something.
That
Yeah,
said, you know, going to a park behind a tree where there's nobody around, sure. On a sidewalk in front of a storefront where you're going to affect traffic to the store, other people are watching you or have to see you, I should say, not so much watching you. Um, you know, I that it's a whole nother issue. There's kids around,
right.
it's
You're
just
thinking about the effect on society in general
yeah.
and kind of impeding on the rights of others through that. And I think the state needs to kind of deal with that. Um, the the liberal judges, both Sotomayor and Kagan, I have to say that they didn't sound too rational in their arguments. So Sotomayor says you don't
Do you
arrest
think it's because
babies.
they're liberal or women?
Neither, Bob. Neither.
Okay, just checking.
Uh, you don't arrest babies who have blankets over them. You don't arrest people who are sleeping on the beach. That's Sotomayor. And Kagan said sleeping is a biological necessity. It's sort of like breathing, but I wouldn't expect you to criminalize breathing in public. Eh, I mean,
Uh,
I like
Sleeping on the
Gorsuch's
beach
argument
isn't
better.
illegal.
Yeah, I like Gorsuch's argument a little better. I've slept on beaches. Nobody's roused me up, right?
No, no.
So,
But if they passed a law against sleeping on the beach, then you'd either accept your fine or you would not sleep on the beach. It's kind of like speeding, right?
yeah. So it's an interesting issue. I'm guessing they're going to sort of punt on this. I don't see them ruling that people have a right to sleep wherever they want. I can't see that with this conservative court. It'll be interesting to see how far they go, whether they really empower the state, even if they're not providing other means for them to be sheltered, that they can still uh, fine them and jail them and give punishments for either defecating or living in a public space. Um, it'll be interesting to see how they come out. I don't think they've ever crossed that bridge before. Speaking of encampments, uh, seems like all the news has been about these college protests lately. I don't know where you come out on that. I go back and forth. Personally, if you're threatening someone, Um, that's not good. I don't believe in any violence, property damage, anything like that when you're protesting. Nonviolent protests, um, not hate speech. Um,
Yeah, here's the
Even
thing.
though you might not
It's
agree with the view, we should
you
allow that.
there's laws that permit you to protest in this country, but you can't protest on private property when they don't want you there. And that's exactly what a university is. And they're infringing on the rights of other students to learn, especially when they occupy whole buildings. A lot of these protesters are threatening supporters of Jewish people or Israel or Jewish people themselves. That's a real problem for a safe school environment, right? And the school is responsible for that. It's just like with an abortion clinic. You can't stand on the abortion clinic property and block doors and protest against abortion. It's against the law. It goes the same for these universities. If the universities decide they're not going to allow that activity there on the university property, they've got every right to get rid of the kids. And I don't think, generally speaking, that the those protesting in support of Hamas are well educated on the matter to begin with, right? Although
Yeah, I
I
mean,
could say those that may be protesting on the other side might not be that well educated on the matter either.
well,
Regardless of that, I mean, they can go off campus and protest.
yeah, I mean that was sort of Mars' point that he doesn't think they know the history, and I don't know either way, and I don't think he does either. I would imagine there are some pretty well educated about it that are protesting, and others that are just going along with the protest.
I think there's
Um,
also some money from outside sources being pumped in there, and
po-
I,
Possibly, I don't know.
news was reporting that last night, whether or not it's true. But I mean, and that money could be coming from either side of the aisle, right? It could be coming kind of from far left, or it could be coming from the right, who are trying to embarrass Biden. Um,
Yeah, I mean
and
clearly it's become a political thing now from the
well,
election standpoint, right?
it's interesting.
If I was a college administrator, I would give them time to protest. I would be a little bit patient with it. I would. It seems like they've kind of given them deadlines to say, okay, we hear you. You've done your gig. Now we have to kind of get on. We're in the business of educating people. We need to kind of get on. We can't kind of stop business. We can't impede people from going to class, whatnot. And once they get to that point, they call in the police or whatever to get them cleared out. I kind of see that as kind of a middle ground. I think down in Texas, I think the governor kind of, with a little different view, he sort of took preemptive action, which I guess is another way to do it. Um, I don't, I don't know. Like when I watch Fox, they say pro-Hamas, anti-Israel protests. They always say that. To me, that's a political slant on it. Um, I would guess that some of this is anti-war funding, um, little bit of his standing up for who they see as the oppressed, which they.
I'm on the side of people that are anti-war and anti-war funding, but I still think, from a law perspective, they need to protest where it's allowed.
Yeah, I mean,
And
yeah, I
it's
mean
not
there
like the
are
schools
rules,
aren't
and
giving them plenty of warning either, right?
that's what I said. If you're giving them warning, I don't believe in trying to squelch it right away. You give them warning, you say you've had your time, whatever. We're going to clean this up. If you're not going to leave, then. But that's sort of the point of protesting is to kind of make things difficult for others, and because that gets people's attention, right? If you're just standing on the street with a sign, um, because they told you to stand on this corner with a sign, because from 9 to 2, that's what your permit allows. That's not going to get the attention that this is going to get. So the point of protest is to get attention to an issue, I think. So you do have to take sometimes drastic measures to get people's attention um, towards an issue. I don't know if the tough thing is that there could be backlash with that, right? because they might hear you, but then be against you because you've done certain things, which I don't know if we're getting to that stage or not, but it's a tough thing. I support the right for free speech, but like you said, there are certain rules for assembly and protest that need to be followed too, right?
Exactly. I mean, the law exists for a reason. And again, it's municipality to municipality and university to university. But yeah, the law's there for a reason.
What I don't
You don't
like
want people.
is that now it's become a political habitator, right? One side is, like you said, they're trying to embarrass Biden because chaos on campuses and the
Well,
liberal
yeah, I think
elites,
it actually.
and
I think it's more intelligent actually than chaos on campuses. I think it really comes down to trying to split the Democrat Party for those who support Israel and those who don't,
oh yeah,
um, because both sides are a significant portion of the Biden vote, and if you can disenfranchise one side over the other, you can influence the vote big time. And so I think, and if you read the news lately, and I'm sure you have, there's a lot of stories about there for people who support, the Palestinian side, whether you want to call it Hamas or not, and and how they are refusing to vote for Biden because of funding for the war and funding for Israel and support of Israel.
yep,
So I mean, he's really trying to walk a fine line. He hasn't said anything really about that, at least not in detail. So it's pretty interesting. It's good stuff
yeah, and I thought
if you
maybe,
like that sort of thing.
yeah, I mean, it is interesting, and it's interesting how the media portrays it, and maybe if they were carrying tiki torches, Fox would be good with the anti-Semitism. I don't know. I just think it's a little hypocritical 3 years later that they seem to be up in arms now, but that's neither here nor there.
We've had a conversation about this before. I remember pacing around my last place talking about this very thing and anti-Semitism, and I never, I'm going to say it again though. I really never realized it existed to
Yep.
this extent. I mean, I, I'm really quite amazed by the amount of hatred for that religion, people of that origin. I just don't understand it. To me, I wasn't raised that way. I've never thought that way. I see a Jewish person or I speak to a Jewish person, I really don't perceive them as anything other than just a normal person. You know what I mean? So I mean, it's something I never really, I knew it existed, but I never thought it was as major a thing as it is. And it's shocking to me because I still, on some level, I just don't get it. How you can have hatred for somebody, so much hatred over what?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely got a long and sorry history going back thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's not anything new, but it's always there, right? It's always in the underlying, and I would imagine it pops up for different reasons, and somebody's always looking for a scapegoat, and unfortunately they've played that role many a time in history. Um,
At the same time, I'll just kind of say what I've said too. It's a matter of I don't support funding wars. I really don't think we should be sending money overseas to anybody. You know what I mean? I don't care what country it is. I think we got plenty of issues here where we could spend our money if we could get our budget in order. But and that goes for Ukraine, that goes for the Israeli war, it goes for a lot of other conflicts that are going on in Africa all the time, or anywhere else in the world. We shouldn't be funding war.
nope, I think we agree on that point. Um, I'd rather not do that. I'd rather provide a defense for our country rather than get involved in everything, be the world's policeman. But there is a philosophy that you need to do that too. You need to do that to ensure that we still have our freedom.
I
I've
think with
never really
modern
bought into that
technology,
philosophy.
I think with modern technology, it's easier than ever, especially for somebody with the powers of our government or the capabilities of our government and intelligence agencies to kind of figure out what's going on in other countries, and if need be, through a hack of some kind, put an end to something like a nuclear program, for instance, or some plot against us. And then if something actually does happen, you hit them hard, right?
Yeah,
So
you
hard they didn't see what was coming,
right.
and so fast, so hard they didn't see what's coming. That's it. But you don't need to, you don't need to kill people. And I think we maybe had this conversation when we were hanging out, but I do really think that because we want to fund all this research and be the biggest and best in the world, we need a way to generate revenue for that. And the easiest way is to sell more weapons. So, you know, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but I know what I believe, and that says we need to stop it.
Yep. Our most famous general in the 20th century said, "Beware of the military-industrial complex." Right? And
Yeah.
he was a general and a president, and I assume he knew what he was talking about. Speaking of war, we almost since the last time we spoke, we almost had World War III start. Although it just happened over a weekend. You sort of texted me. I think it was a Saturday night. Like Iran's attacking Israel. I'm like, I better turn on the news. Like this might be it. And sure enough, drones and missiles were flying from Iran to Israel
And then Israel
directly,
responded.
directly. And so, and then Israel responded. And my takeaway from all of that, and again, we haven't heard anything about that in a couple of weeks, which is sort of strange. Now we're focused on campus protests
Yeah.
rather than World War III, which we, I guess, narrowly avoided. But my takeaway was Iran sort of wasn't embarrassed themselves, right? They appeared to be a little bit of a paper tiger, right? They kind of said, "Well, we kind of took it easy on you," but I think the defensive, I think they overreacted, right, to Israel's attack of their consulate or whatever in Syria. Um, I think Iran overreacted with a clear, pretty major strike, right? Even though it was fairly telegraphed.
Yeah.
Stuff could have happened. Just imagine if thousands of Israelis were killed in that strike. What Israel would have had to do in in
In
response.
response, yeah.
So luckily, the defensive systems, both of Israel, the United States, and I think British were involved too, prevented that from happening. But it didn't have to be that way, and we could be in a very different stage today. And then
And
I
then
think,
Israel responded and basically said, it basically showed them we can pretty much do what we want to you.
right, which
And
is exactly what they did, right?
you know, they
They
didn't
said,
hurt, they didn't take any leaders out. They didn't hurt any people, but they, at least not any of the, main citizenry, but they basically said, we can take your defense out real fast. And then what's next?
right. I think that, and I generally don't agree with Bibi, but I think that was a smart move to say we're not gonna really do it, but we're gonna show you what we're capable of. So watch what you do, right?
Yep.
That's kind of the message they sent, and then it kind of got put to bed at least for now. It seems. Um, so I sort of agree with that. I was kind of fearful that Israel was going to overreact, but it seemed like they did send a clear message to Iran that said we could do
Thing
whatever
is,
we want within your.
um, I don't know if it solves the problem of the Iranians funding terrorist activities.
No, no. I mean that's still going to occur. That's still kind of the indirect war, but at least you're not lobbing missiles back and forth and having a conventional war. six of one, half dozen of another. It still looks bad, but you haven't escalated it to the direct conflict level, I guess, which I guess we could be thankful for.
We need that. It's one of those things, again, I mean, if we kind of stop funding, right, we stop spending our money and our resources over there and say, you know what, the United States is going to back away. And what will be, will be. I mean, maybe Israel would walk a little more softly too.
Yep. So that was interesting that happened. We haven't talked about the elephant in the room yet. Donald. Couple things on his front. The Another Supreme Court case. They heard the arguments on the immunity, presidential immunity. Again, a very consequential case for this country as far as what powers the president has, and is he or she truly above the law while serving in the role as president. And it kind of surprised me that they're giving it as much credence as it appears to be from the questioning and the arguments that were heard, I guess, a week or two ago. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I'm surprised by that as well. I think they're trying to walk a fine line there because I think some of their points are valid, right? You can't, I mean, the president has to be allowed to take steps that he thinks are prudent.
Yeah. So, Bob, as I was thinking about this, so if they sort of broadly define, quote unquote, the official acts, so, and they pose this question to Trump's attorney about shooting a political rival. If they do it fairly broadly, saying under an official act, so you're okay with Biden arresting Trump and putting him in jail? Because if it's fairly broad, he's doing it as an official act. If he believes it's for the national security of the country as the commander in chief and as the president of the United States, then he should be able to do that, right?
Well, that's not the way the laws
Well,
work.
it's an official act. They asked the attorney,
But
Trump's
there's a
attorney,
clear
whether
definition of way the justice system works in
they were
this
they were
country, and the
okay with
president is
shooting a
not
political rival.
the president is not a prosecutor.
Well, it's an official act.
There are still
Or
laws as far as
so
how
so,
the
so he's okay with killing him, but he's not okay with jailing him. So he could command a SEAL team, which I think was the question the Supreme Court asked Trump's attorney, and he basically said, "Yeah, that's our argument that he could do that to a political rival if he felt in his powers as president that that was for the good of the country." I mean, it gets into a really weird place if they don't just slam the door on this, right? But I
yeah.
hear you. But I hear you.
But it
All
also comes
presidents,
down
you
to, well, the
need.
president thinks it's a good idea to attack the
You're right.
one of the Iranian generals because he was planning a major attack in the United States, and then the
Right.
following president happens to be connected somehow through money or
Well,
philosophy, and says, hey, you know what, that was illegal, and we're going to prosecute him.
yeah. I mean, they brought up. I was reading an article. They brought up Obama and what Bush did in regards to extraditions and the when we're after 9/11 when we were taking people to dark sites and whatever.
Waterboarding, yeah,
Right.
or worse.
Obama didn't pursue that, but in theory, you're saying here that, well, that's something that if we're not careful, that we can open up that can of worms. Which again, I don't think we should do that. But you kind of get into these weird arguments where what's an official act and what's not. To me,
Yeah, so the question would be is do they draw a line or not, right?
yeah,
Because
I
they
don't
don't
know.
want to discourage the president's ability to take action, prudent
Right.
action when need be. But you also don't want to encourage complete off the rails banana republic BS. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. It
Yeah,
really
and
is. And and they were pretty anxious to take this case. I was surprised they took it at all. And I wonder now if they kind of regret it because they're in a position where they have to say something.
Well, yeah, because they've delayed it, and they waited to April to hear the arguments. They're probably not going to rule on it to June, which basically gives Trump a free pass on many of these trials because this case kind of freezes those trials anyway.
And if they
Um,
rule in his favor at all the other trials that are going on or have occurred could potentially have a new spin on them.
oh, without a doubt. To me, trying to gin up the election so you win isn't an official act, but I'm sure they're going to spin it that way because the president elections are a big part of democracy. So isn't the president responsible for that? And shouldn't he make sure that elections are conducted fairly? Although in this case it would favor him. I don't buy that argument, but it will be interesting to see how they do that. And interestingly enough, the one case that might not be related to that is the one in New York that's ongoing, right? Because that
Yep.
occurred before he was president.
Right.
Um, and following that case, to me, they have a stronger case than I originally thought. At least after the first week of testimony. I don't know if you're following it or not, but basically the
Only
public.
loosely through news and headlines and things like that.
So just for our listeners, I've kind of I've got I find these cases interesting. I should have been a lawyer. Um, so I think this case breaks down to two elements. The first one seems fairly easy, that he made the payments through Cohen, through lawyers, to one hush Stormy Daniels up, and then there's this Karen McDougal case, which is another affair that he wanted silenced. Um, I think the idea that he made those payments and one the misdemeanor is the falsifying the business records, which he basically Cohen billed him as legal fees, I guess, for these payments. The Trump organization for these payments that went to hush money, quote unquote. So I think that's easy. The question then becomes, was it to kind of the stretch is whether it's a felony, which is due to the campaign finance violation laws. So I guess if you falsify business records in furtherance of another crime, then it becomes a felony, which then is a bigger deal. So to me, that's always been the stretch. But it appears that the publisher of National Enquirer, who testified last week, this David Pecker, appropriately named David Pecker, for this
Hmm.
trial, can't make this stuff up. Basically said, yeah, we all knew it was for the campaign. It was to benefit the campaign because all of this occurred in 2015, 2016.
By
Um,
new, were they told that or did they assume that and were quite confident, right? I
well, I
mean,
think, yeah.
it's like when you're watching a football game and you know your quarterback, is going to throw an interception on the last drive of the game to lose. You know it, right? But it's not because somebody told you it's going to happen. You know it either through experience or through logic.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know from the testimony and the emails and the other evidence they provided, it's pretty explicit that this is what they were trying to do. Because Trump's argument is, well, it was to protect my family. And interestingly enough, this occurred, if you remember, John Edwards, who was a vice presidential
Yeah, I
candidate.
remember him. Yep.
He had an affair. His wife,
Virginia
while
or the
his,
Carolinas, right? Yeah.
yeah, I think he was from North Carolina. Um, he was John Kerry's running mate back in 2004. He had an affair, and I think maybe a baby out of wedlock. I don't know. While his wife had cancer, not a good look. Um, and so he went to trial too. That very similar to this case, where he was paying to kind of keep this quiet. Um, and in that case, he got acquitted for that. because his argument was that it wasn't for the benefit of the campaign, it was for to protect my wife from the fact that I was having an affair. Trump might be a little different. He's got a different history, I think. That's why they were playing the Access Hollywood tapes, or at least introducing them into evidence that
Well,
maybe Melania knew about this stuff or suspected about it. So maybe it wasn't necessarily to protect his family. That
well, what could
I
be his
know
kids?
it's interesting. It's interesting whether that kind of is his historical kind of activities will play into the fact that, I mean, the timing came up because these things tend to come out of the woodwork when you run for president, right? I mean, all these things occurred 10 years before.
Right.
All the payments, all of that occurred 10 years before when he wasn't, not the payments, but the activities, the affairs, whatever,
Hmm.
occurred 10 years before. And then they sort of, so, I mean, that's not a good look from the prosecution standpoint when you have Stormy and Karen McDougal kind of
And the McDougal thing,
peddling their stories or
yeah, the
whatever.
McDougal thing. I mean, he wasn't found guilty. He had to pay in civil court, which is a much easier case to win from the plaintiff's uh, point of view, right? And I also think too. I mean, I don't know. I do have the general feeling that the courts are stacked against Trump in New York, right? Which is why a lot of these cases are being brought in New York. Of course, he did have a business there and lived there quite a bit. I don't think they're easily winnable on appeal. So how do I say that? I don't think the prosecution is going to win as easily on appeal. So that's yeah, we'll see.
So your take is even if they get him, I mean, I thought this was more of a long shot, and I was kind of sorry that they brought this case up because I think it's kind of a unique take on things, and I don't think anyone's ever been kind of prosecuted along these lines before. So it's not the case I would like, but given the timing of everything else, it might be the only case that there is. And it appears like they're presenting evidence, but your take is that New York is kind of in the bag for anti-Trump, and when it goes to the appeals court, he'll stand a better chance of getting it reversed, even if they win a conviction.
Exactly.
Yeah, I
And
mean, unfortunately, we
it's not just New York too. It's that case in Georgia, which I know hasn't really been happening lately, but RICO cases. If you look at RICO cases, which is what they're trying to build against them, they're they're definitely easier to win the case for the prosecution, but upon appeal, they're more likely than other cases to fall. And and that's the thing, right? I mean, all he really kind of needs to do is drag this out, become president, and it, it'll be interesting though. I mean, he's not guaranteed the presidency again either. So
no, honestly, I think he's a weak candidate. He's a weaker candidate than he was in 2016.
yeah, I
Uh,
absolutely think that's the case.
I think it's a little
I
old
don't know
hat.
what
He's
is.
playing the same records he's played before, and
We
uh,
both said this. I don't know what his policy is outside of what it was when he
right.
was around the first time, and the first time he signed gigantic budgets that shouldn't have been signed, right? He the first COVID related bill he signed. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
But I mean, every time he goes up on stage now, it's they want to get me, they want to get you. Well, tell me what you're going to do. What
yeah.
are you going to do about it?
He was in Wisconsin today because they didn't have the trial, so he was a couple hours from. I think he was in Waukesha, Wisconsin, which was one of the first rallies he's done in a while. So I didn't really watch it, but
He's supposedly winning in all the swing states, and he's going to be speaking at the Libertarian Convention, which is the first, I think, GOP presidential candidate to do that, or a president at least to do that, which is interesting.
Yep, it's still a long way to go, but can't believe we're where we're at in this country.
I still think, when are the conventions? July.
July, August, I think usually they are.
So I still don't think Biden is going to run. We'll see.
They're still there.
Hmm.
I don't know. He looks pretty chipper now. At least he's got a little bit more swagger. I mean,
I,
if you looked at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, he had some good lines. They're finally kind of sensing that he needs to kind of give it back to Trump a little bit, kind of maybe not take the high road as much, and I think that will work in his favor if he could do a little bit more of that, kind of get in the dirt a little bit with Donald, show a little fight, I guess.
I think he should be out in front of the public every day.
Yeah, I think they're sensing that. I think they're doing that a little bit more, but they could always do it more. They definitely this a strategy of rope a dope is not going to work here. That to kind of keep them what they did in 2020. I don't think it's gonna work in this election to kind of keep them hit. Luckily, they had COVID COVID at that time. Too. I think COVID worked to his advantage in the 2020 election for various reasons.
Yeah.
I think it helped him.
Oh
Um,
yeah, absolutely.
I don't think he has that now, so he's
Well,
got
some of those COVID laws that helped change the way people vote are still in place.
some of them are, but some of them aren't. I think I think that's kind of a mixed bag, but I think from the campaign trail, he's got to definitely take a more aggressive stance if he really wants to win this thing.
It's interesting to me that Trump hasn't done a debate this cycle either.
Nope, he hasn't.
He just wiped the floor with them, and he knew he's like, I don't even have to bother, and he didn't.
Yeah, it'll be
And
interesting
and
to
I
see
think
when they go after each other or
it,
go against each other.
it's also interesting to me thinking about that whole debate cycle on the Republican primary side. A lot of the people that probably should have been in there weren't. Rand Paul always is going to run like Ron Paul used to did, but he or used to do, but he didn't this time, which is interesting to me, you know. And there were other probably better Republican candidates who did not run. Um, I'm, yeah, it's interesting. And I think there's probably people out there kind of waiting in the wings for the next election cycle to kind of run. We'll see.
Speaking,
Another topic we're not bringing up. Sorry, I interrupted your transition there, but did you see that story on Christy Nome?
yeah, what's with it with Republicans and their dogs?
She put in her book.
I know,
That's just unbelievable to me. Like right before she was gonna potentially be a VP candidate. That's
right?
amazingly stupid.
Like who, like the publisher, the campaign, who okayed that? They should all be fired too.
Absolutely. Her campaign manager.
Don't they realize what? I don't know how many half of Americans own
We should
dogs.
probably say what this is about too, right? So she had a dog, and it was a
Right.
puppy. She basically said that the puppy had an ill temper and didn't listen, and she shot it.
Yeah,
And that
Biden's dog has
was
bitten every one of member of his staff. He should have
right.
put a bullet in that dog's head a while ago, right?
Well, nobody's heard from those dogs again. I mean, you don't hear any news stories on them.
That's right. Maybe he did.
So maybe he did,
Maybe the Secret Service did because I think they were mostly biting them.
or he possibly sent it up to North Dakota.
A poison
Or is
doggy
Nome
bone or something.
yeah, is Nome, is she North Dakota or South Dakota?
She is South Dakota because that other guy
Okay,
is North
yeah.
Dakota. Yeah, the guy who ran for president. I don't know his name, but he was from North Dakota. She's South Dakota. So she went up to Romney. You know, Romney only tied his dog to the roof of his car,
I'm no
supposedly,
Mitt Romney fan.
allegedly. But yeah, I think we could cross her out of the vice presidential running at this point, right?
I think yeah, she's done.
Just the sheer poor judgment alone. Not even the fact that she shot her dog. the fact that she wrote it, put it in her book, and now is sort of doubling down on it. I guess. Yeah. Why not?
I,
I guess at this point.
both of those disqualify her for me. I could not. I mean, I yeah. And don't you know what? I mean, I'm not gonna judge anybody outside of her. I've never been able to put down a pet. My pets that were very sick. It's just one of those things where I don't like stepping on a bug or a spider, and I can't ever, the pets I've lost, I haven't been able to take that step, and that's the vet doing it, right? I mean, I couldn't shoot the thing. It just, I don't, to me, it's not something that I can.
And it wasn't like the pet was sick.
Right.
It just wouldn't do what she
Just,
wanted it to do. I think
yeah. My kids are bad all the time. They're still here.
you've just up your standing in our listeners. Not only won't you kill a bug, your kids are still around.
Exactly. And they will be, hopefully, forever.
Your kids are well behaved. We spent the last week with them. They're angels.
Well, I appreciate that, Kevin. You can make a good politician.
There you go. Speaking of politicians, you just mentioned his name, and before we wrap up, we want to cover Rand Paul, right?
I do like Rand Paul.
Your political hero. We haven't
He
really talked
is.
about Rand much, and he's always named after Ayn Rand, right?
And Rand Paul.
Pick up Atlas
Hmm.
Shrugged or The Fountainhead. I've read both of them. Have you
Yeah,
read
they're both
those?
good books. I have. Yeah.
I would assume, as a libertarian, it's almost the libertarian Bible.
I think that's where it stems from.
Um, so Rand is clearly a libertarian.
She's the L. Ron Hubbard of politicians.
She was Russian, though, wasn't she? I thought she was a Russian immigrant. I might be wrong. Somewhere in Eastern Europe, but I thought she was
Yeah, I can't
Russian.
back you up on that one because I'm really not sure, and I don't want to make myself seem dumber than I already do.
She's a fascinating character. So we recommend reading both of those books because it does lay out the philosophy pretty well, right?
Hmm.
Whether you believe it or not, they're decent reads and raise interesting questions about society and our personal responsibility for things, right?
I'm a fan,
So Rand,
but not of L. Ron Hubbard's, just to be clear. All right, go ahead.
you,
I did compare them.
you did you did throw them in the same.
Yeah, I did.
I didn't compare them. You did. This is where the podcast gets sloppy at the end, and we start
Yeah,
comparing Ayn Rand to L. Ron Hubbard. Although I think they came
they
about
both.
sort of in the same
Yes.
times. They were contemporaries. I think
Yeah,
one
and
wrote
they, yeah.
Dianetics. The other wrote. You ever read that book?
No,
One
I have not.
you haven't? Oh, come
No.
on. And one wrote Atlas Shrugged. So Rand is a believer in limited government, right?
He is. And he likes to call out, maybe for political reasons, maybe for humor, maybe just because he wants limited government, uh, wastes of government spending, government time, government funds, taxpayer funds. So he does release every year around Christmas a Festivus report.
Is-
And so this is a little bit old news here, but the 2023 version we thought would be kind of fun to talk over a little bit.
and I'm a believer in active government. I think it plays a role in our society, but I respect Rand Paul, and I think we need voices like him because he's a check, right, on some of this excess and craziness that tends to go on, right? You need those people pushing back the other way. It can't all be, oh, we'll just throw money at it or government's the answer to everything. I think I want people like Rand Paul in our government, and I want them to have a voice. So even though I don't agree with him on a lot of things, um, I want that person in there bringing this stuff up because I don't want our government to waste money. I don't want it to be inefficient. I want every tax dollar that we give the government to be put to a good use. And I'm not naive enough to think that doesn't happen, right? And I'm not naive enough to think that it's always going to be perfect. But I think there's a role to be played for people who bring this stuff out and question it and kind of give back to people who are, the Bernie Sanders and the big, we'll just spend as much as we want. And although I think Bernie wants to know where the money goes to, but I think Rand is kind of an important voice in the government. So I just wanted to say that. Um, Even though I don't agree with him on a lot of things, I think he is an important voice in the government. So you wanted to go
He's a
through.
losing voice. He's a
He's
losing voice, I
often a
think.
losing voice. Often, often a losing voice. He's one of the soul voices, right? He's shouting into
Yep.
the wind
Yep.
often.
Him and
Uh,
Tom Massey. Yep.
so we could go through some of these things just so people are aware of what Rand has put in this report that he issued for last year about some of the waste that is in government. So if you want to take a couple of them, Bob, I could do a couple more. Some of them are pretty funny or kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. So, first of all, um, this might not be the most funny one, but he pointed out that national debt, there was 657 billion paid on interest in a year, which is, you know, fast accelerating, and we're getting kind of towards the point where sooner or later the national debt's going to exceed um, where where we can deal with it in a reasonable manner.
Well, they said
But
we're already spending close or more on interest than our military budget, which is our largest discretionary budget item.
it,
That's concerning.
it's concerning. Uh, so I'll keep going. So the COVID funds bill during the height of COVID bailed companies out. It was 800 billion, and a relatively significant portion. It's a small portion, but still significant. Went to uh, fraudulent entities who provided pictures of themselves, which were the
I'm looking at these
faces of
pictures and
Barbie
just laughing.
dolls,
It's just
right?
laughing.
Just Barbie dolls, and
So that
they were stamped and approved, and the money's gone, right?
so they had to provide, an ID or photo of who they are to verify their existence, right? And so
Right,
they took pictures of dolls and Barbie and
and they were
submitted
given the
that,
money.
and they were given the money. And the government evidently had some program or AI to determine, and Barbie doll photos just got right through. That's a head scratcher, right?
That's yeah. It's a symptom of the problem, right? And the overall amount, when you consider $800 billion, might be somewhat negligible, but that's really a sign of how much money is being defrauded, you know, of our
Well,
government and never comes back.
well, it's an obvious thing that shouldn't, you know, you know that there's going to be sophisticated fraud, right? And
Right.
sometimes those are hard to catch, especially if you're trying to do something quick and get money out. There's going
But
to
that's the
be, it's going to
equivalent of
be, it's,
you're related to a prince in Nigeria who's going to leave you all his money and he's
right,
died.
right. The
That's
bucket's going to be leaky, but obvious crap like this, you kind of like, you sort of lose faith a little bit. Even me, I'm like, come on.
so
If
next,
we're
6 million to boost Egyptian tourism, right?
Well, that's fine. What's your
I
problem with that?
We're not Egypt,
But I've been to Egypt. It was
but
nice.
I'm pretty sure Tulsa could use some help in their tourism department. Why are we sending it to Egypt? And this really reminds me of a story back when I was in college, actually graduate school, where a bunch of money had been sent to some African country to teach males there how to properly wash their genitals.
Okay, good
and
cause.
and it was actually in the stimulus bill for the economy, right? So I'm kind of a hawk, if you will, on stimulus bills and how the money's spent. But this money was spent to stimulate our economy, and it got sent to Africa to teach African men, African citizens, not African American men, to wash their genitals. And I can think that might stimulate something, but it's definitely not the American economy. It just it's unbelievable. So I think we'll continue going through this list. I'll let you take a run at it, and then maybe I'll throw a few others afterwards.
Well, clearly he has something. Just looking through these, I think he's got a bone to pick with Fauci because about half of them are have to do with the National Institute of Health.
He does not
Uh,
like Fauci.
he does not like Fauci. Something about a study of Russian cats on a treadmill, which got a 2 point. I want to see that. I mean, for $2.7 million, it could be worth seeing the cats on a treadmill, right? But they got a 2 points, right? I
What
mean,
kind of cats were they?
kind of funny. It doesn't say, but they got a $2.7 million grant, which I guess they outsourced to some research institute in St. Petersburg to study. He doesn't really say what they were, what, what exactly they were studying
What I want to know
with the
is who
cats
in
on
that
a treadmill.
research institute donated money to what politician.
And then he's got right. Then he's got three 33 million going to Fauci's Monkey Island.
I saw that.
So evidently there's an island. It doesn't say where the island is. It's a state-owned island. Oh, South Carolina. I want to
Yeah,
go see. I want to
Carolinas.
go. I want to go visit Monkey Island, where they keep 3,000 monkeys.
Are you allowed to pet the monkeys if you go there? That's what I need to know.
I don't know. You might be able to punt the monkeys, but I sort of don't. I mean, to me, this is sort of a. He's going after Fauci
Yeah,
because
I
I
stay
think we
away from that
need.
one.
Yeah, we need monkeys for research, don't we?
Yep, I think you do, and
But
so it kind of makes
I don't
sense.
know about 33 million dollars.
That's all. Yeah,
Seems
that's
a
a lot of
little
money
high.
to. Yeah,
Seems a little high for monkeys to run a monkey island.
it does.
There might be some monkey business there. Then there's
Yeah, I
always
saw there's money for walking hot dogs. So via the
what what
Department of
like good
Agriculture, they
looking dogs,
like Labradors. So I mean,
like a good
if
looking
you're
Labrador, like a hot Labrador.
a hot Labrador, and
Oh
this is
no,
in
physically hot.
Afghanistan. Yeah,
No,
no, like
like temperature hot.
yep. So you make sure
Oh,
their
okay.
temperature's hot, and then you take them for a walk, and you get a bunch of money for that. Which actually, that's kind of a business opportunity. We could maybe try to walk, I don't know, cold cats, and maybe get, I don't know, a few $1 million. You and I could try that one. I don't know if it's been approved yet, but yeah, why, that's a lot of money for BS.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I'm going to start writing a government grant because evidently it's pretty easy to get money. So here's another NIH one, where they're funding to give monkeys meth, and they're
I saw
tracking
that one. That was on my list. Right.
meth head monkeys. It doesn't say how
Why?
much. Oh, $12 million to track the sleeping habits of monkeys given meth in the morning. I'm guessing their sleeping habits aren't great. I'm just I'm just
Should,
guessing.
they should, and they're missing an opportunity because they should be like testing their tooth health too, don't you think?
Yeah,
How long does it take their teeth to fall out?
the report sort of writes itself. Oh boy. That interestingly enough, he goes after the public funding of presidential campaigns simply because no one has ever taken the money. Right? When you fill out your tax return, I think it's $3, right?
Yep.
You could designate $3. I don't know how that works. That comes out of that's funded by the IRS. That right? You don't pay more. That's either that's being credited somehow, right? So that's federal funding, right?
Yep.
into I guess there's $400 million in a fund somewhere. We could pay down none of our very little of our national debt with that if we um, sitting in a fund somewhere and know because I think if you accept that money, then you can't raise other money. If I generally understand the rule there, so these are for presidential campaigns. If you say you're only going to accept public funds, then you can't accept private funds.
Do you know there's also a slush fund out there for Congress? So when Congress people are accused of, let's say, some sexual wrongdoing, uh, the settlement comes out of that slush fund. They just settle out of a taxpayer funded fund.
Nice.
Have you read it? Yeah, if you haven't read
I
on
haven't
that,
read
you should
that.
read on it. It's pretty interesting.
Well, we got to protect those guys.
You can get a yeah.
And then,
It's a just which yeah, we'll probably go into that on another podcast. But that's a part of the reason I think a lot of the Congress people are compromised to begin with.
then it looks like the SBA during COVID to entertainers, because they weren't able to tour, they gave them
Yep.
money to keep up their staff, and
So like 200
evidently,
million.
yeah, 200 million. I guess Post Malone, Lil Wayne, Chris Brown, and the Pumpkins, Smashing Pumpkins, got $10 million each. And they even gave Nickelback $2 million.
They're Canadian.
That's true, and they're not good.
No, they're not. They're
I
awful.
mean, I could see giving $10 million to Post Malone because, I mean, clearly we don't want Post Malone to go away
No,
because I think he would be suffering. I mean, supposedly it was to
that's how he was able to afford all those face tattoos, probably.
keep up their staff and their people, but that seems a little excessive. What about? Did you see this thing about?
$1.9 million grant to study gambling monkeys.
Well, I don't have a problem with
They
that.
were given a low risk, low reward choice and a high risk, high reward option, with the monkeys choosing risk over reward more than 70% of the time.
That's interesting, isn't it? How much do we pay to do that?
$1.9 million grant to the National Institute of Health and Drug Abuse.
That's it's kind of interesting. I kind of like that we know that.
So there was an additional $171,000. The government likes its gambling monkeys. So this was actually a flashback on the most recent report from 2014. But $171,000 at that time, which in today's money is significantly more, considering all the inflation we've had, National Science Foundation study made monkeys gamble.
I mean, if they put
And
that on ESPN or something, I think the one $2
I'd
million
watch
is
that. They
well.
could make money.
I mean, that's
Yeah,
well. I want to see the gambling monkeys.
that actually would be an investment if they put it on ESPN and charged a fee to watch it or
Right, be
whatever.
better than that
Yeah,
poker championship or whatever
yeah, I
they
don't
put
watch
on.
those at all.
You know,
Exactly.
I want the monkeys in the sunglasses,
Yeah, exactly. Smoking cigars.
smoking cigars, doing poker.
Yep.
That'd be great.
They all need to know how to give the finger as well, just because that would be amazing.
I think that would be money well spent. All right, and then finally, he goes after Fauci for $477,000 for the transgender monkey study. Not to be confused with the gambling monkey. this is this is the
Or the transgender gambling monkeys.
transgender monkey study from the National Institute of Health. Uh, yes, forced feminization of male rhesus macaws, monkeys.
Macau.
I
Yeah.
don't know how to say that, but to address social injustices.
So do they like put them in dresses or something, or what do they exactly do?
Again, we should film this stuff, right?
Yeah, I'd watch that.
Watch that.
Be better than The Bachelor.
That would be my recommendation for a lot of this. If we could film some of these studies, I think we could have. I think we could
Let's
make some of our money back.
let's film the study and let's let's put the Congress people who funded the bill and who introduced the bill, put their names right across the bottom of the screen. That
That's
would
a
be
good
great.
idea, Bob. I'm
And
sure Rand would support that idea.
there you go. And actually, it might get them votes because if people like watching transgender monkeys, they may go ahead and continue, But
I
that's
don't think there's
interesting.
anyone who wouldn't like watching transgender monkeys, Bob.
Like dancing around in dress, working out to some like Richard Simmons style workout videos, or
Now, if we could only get them to gamble,
dancing to ABBA,
the transgender gambling monkeys. We'll combine the two shows at
smoking
some
cigars and
at some point.
sunglasses
At some
and
point,
sundresses.
at
Yeah,
sundresses. All right. Well, we'll end on a high note there. I think that's the highlights of Rand's Festivus report. So again, thanks for listening, everyone. You got anything else to add, Bob?
I can't wait till the next show.
I know we might have to record it right away. This one was so good.
Let's get started.
All
Have
right.
have a good week, everybody.
Yep. Everyone have a good week. Talk to you later. Bye.